In the world of modern literature, there are very few, if any, like John Irving. He's what you call a macho feminist, a writer who also wrestles, and the more popular of the so-called literary authors, whose daring, unsettling novels mesh the comic and the tragic.
And that's why it was so important that you came. Maybe the shock might bring her back.
But here's the thing. John might never have become a novelist if it were not for this. Growing up in New Hampshire, John never knew his own pops, and because his mother never spoke about him, John used his imagination to dream up who his dad might be. Missing fathers have figured throughout his fiction, right back to his big breakthrough, The World According to Garp.
I love kids. Oh, me too. I didn't know I loved them so much until I became a woman.
John wasn't fully able to enjoy his early success, though. His marriage was crumbling, but he kept on writing A Prayer for Owen Meany, which over time has become his most read book. And he spent 13 years turning his novel The Cider House Rules, about an abortion doctor and his young protege, into a movie.
Don't be holy to me about the law. What has the law ever done for anyone here?
John won an Oscar for his screenplay, and along the way got remarried to a Canadian and inducted into the National Wrestling Hall of Fame. That, my friends, is an accomplishment. He also continues to tackle the big social issues of the day. His 13th novel is called In One Person. It's the epic story of a bisexual man reflecting on his life from the 1950s through to the AIDS epidemic of the 80s and the unforgettable people he meets.
I'd always been lonely, but self-hatred is worse than loneliness.
Please welcome back to the program, John Irving. Good to see you. How are you?
Good.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you.
I love his book has a lot of themes to explore, my friend.
Yes, it did.
Do you like that?
Well, it may be why I sort of let it sit around for 12 years. It seemed, in a way, too familiar. The World According to Garp was also about intolerance of sexual differences. And I thought, oh, not this again. But given the fact that it is a 13th novel, it's hard to find something that doesn't fall into the, oh, not this again category. So once I got myself around that idea that you've done this before a little bit, I was okay with it.
Is it that it pops up out there in the universe, or it pops up inside you?
Both. I think it stays in me, or it returns in me, because the universe doesn't let it go. I imagined naively enough at the end of the 70s when Garp was published that, well, whatever I write next, it won't have to do with this subject. This subject will surely pass on. But when it doesn't, you find yourself getting angry again about something that made you angry in your 30s, and
well,
here you are.
Being the idea of, I mean, it's been phrased as the sexual suspect, but the idea of being bisexual or being transgendered or any of that.
Yes. Well, I didn't begin writing this novel until June of 2009, but as I said, 12 years ago, it was always what it is, pretty much fully formed. A young transsexual boy falls in love with an older transgender woman, and waiting for him at the end of that story is a young transgender woman, someone he thinks whose passage from boy to girl he can be of some assistance to. So that it is a sexual outsider novel. It is a sexual misfit novel. I seem to be enduringly attracted to those people who have a harder time being accepted for who they are. I like those people. And in a sense, Billy, my main character, my bisexual narrator, he doesn't seem at all such an outsider to me as Garp's mother, Jenny Fields, who has sex once with a comatose man and stops for life.
Right.
That strikes me as radical.
A non-practicing homosexual and another one, right? Who?
The non-practicing, you're right, the non-practicing homosexual who is my narrator for A Prayer for Owen Meany, Johnny Wheelwright, never has sex at all. Yeah. Billy Abbott is a lot easier to imagine, or was a lot easier for me to imagine. Someone who wants to have sex with men and women is a whole lot easier for me to get my imagination around than someone who doesn't want to have sex at all. And I've written about that.
That's the true outsider.
3 times, you know. So,
but can you relate to this idea at all? The Billy character?
well, sure, as I think most people of my generation, if they're honest at all about what they were like in those preteen and early teenage years, sure I can. I grew up in a small town. I went to a single-sex boarding school, an all-boys school. At that age when I was sexually coming of age, and you have to remember that in the 50s or the 60s, you weren't having a lot of actual sex at that age. So, of course, you were imagining sex all the time.
And also, pornography wasn't as prevalent as it is today. The internet's changed all that.
Quite true. So, my sexual imagination was all over the place. I was very infatuated by many of my friends' mothers, by girls my own age, and much to my embarrassment, to older boys on the wrestling team. So you might say that Billy Abbott is simply, I do this a lot when I write novels. I say, okay, this much is true, but what if? It's the but if part that makes a novel. I say, well, suppose all of those things I imagined sexually, suppose that turned out to be me. Suppose I actually, as most young men or young women don't, suppose I actually had acted upon all of these sexual desires or imaginings. What might I have been like? What might anyone have been like?
And it speaks to that idea that we are in this culture where we're often defined by who we desire. And maybe that's not the way to look at it.
Well, one way to see this, I think, is that our sexual identities matter, and perhaps they matter most of all when we recognize that we're a minority and our sexual identity is something that is hard-earned, that we really have to work at, and especially at getting other people to accept us. If we're an individual of that kind, if that is our sexual identity, I just think it's harder. And when you earn the right to say who you are, you're going to defend it a little more tenaciously. But in the same breath, what Miss Frost, the older transgender woman, says to Billy, she upbraids him when he calls her a transsexual, when he says, "You're a man, aren't you?" She says, "My dear boy, please don't put a label on me. Don't make me a category before you get to know me." And that became my ending. What Miss Frost says to Billy is something Billy will repeat to the young homophobic son of a boy he once had a terrible crush on, never realized. That echo of, okay, my sexual identity matters to me, but don't you think you can identify me by putting a name on me? By calling me gay, straight, bi, whatever. You don't define me. That's my job. I define myself. Don't you put me in a place, some convenient pigeonhole, some cubbyhole where you conveniently dismissed me.
It's a strong relationship. And part of this, you're right when you say, oh, no, not that again. This is something that would pop up in people's minds when this commercial ran. Watch this.
I'm not ashamed to admit that I'm a Christian. But you don't need to be in the pew every Sunday to know that there's something wrong in this country when gays can serve openly in the military, but our kids can't openly celebrate Christmas or pray in school. As president, I'll end Obama's war on religion.
It's incredible that even in this modern era, I mean, like, what do you think when you see something like that?
You mean the part I can say or the part I shouldn't?
No, man, this is Canada. You can say whatever you want.
Well, you know, novels sit around so long before I write them, and then they take the years they take to write. You can't give me credit for being timely, because this novel has been in my head for a lot longer, thankfully, than Rick Perry has been in most of our consciousnesses. You know, I can't take credit for the fact that the rabble of morons who comprise the Republican candidates for president in my own country are rabidly homophobic and anti-abortion too. That's an unpleasant coincidence. But, you know, here I am again. It was 1985 when I published the Cider House Rules. And I used to say then to people who were entrenched in their opposition to a woman's right to an abortion, I used to say, you know, if you don't like abortion, don't have one. Nobody's making you have one. I feel similarly about people who are stuck in their opposition to many gay rights issues, marriage equality or gay marriage included. I say, gee, if you don't like the idea of gay marriage, you're probably someone who shouldn't marry someone of the same sex. That might not work out so well for you. And aren't you lucky that nobody's compelling you to do this?
Right.
But make no mistake about it, the other side, too often, frankly, the ultra-Christian side, is telling us what to do. We're not telling them what to do. You don't like abortion, don't do it.
Right.
You don't like gay marriage, you know, don't let yourself get too attracted to someone from the same sex. Better leave it alone.
Stick around. We're going to find out wrestling or writing, which is harder? Anthropology with John Irving right after this.
We got some guys.
Nice job, Ernie.
Nice yourself. Good.
He beat you on the feet. He got all the takedowns.
And most of the balls.
Back here with John Irving. What kind of referee were you?
Oh, in my own mind, I think I was a pretty good referee. You know, I was certified as a referee for 24 years. It wasn't my favorite thing about the world of wrestling. I competed as a wrestler for 20 years until I was 34, which was too long, probably. And I coached the sport until I was 47. It has never seemed to be a strange concurrence that for so many years of my life I was interested in wrestling and in writing equally and at the same time. They seemed to go together to me. They didn't seem discrepant at all in that as a wrestler and as a writer, you have to recognize that so much of your life is repetition. So much of what you do is attend to over and over again to the same small details. You will drill with a semi-cooperative sparring partner, an outside single leg, a high crotch, a duck under, an arm drag, hundreds upon hundreds of times, many more times than you'll ever get to use those moves in an actual match. And if you dislike repetition, if you dislike the actual doing of it, you shouldn't be a part of such a thing. If you dislike rewriting, if you dislike seeing yet again the same sentence that still isn't right, the same paragraph that should possibly be moved somewhere else, if you dislike those small details of the process, you shouldn't be writing either. It is the recognition that what you do alone that nobody sees occupies 90% of your time, and that your life as a published writer, your life as a wrestler in serious competition is very small to the part of yourself you have to dedicate to doing it. The dedication to doing it, well, that's something you better like, because you're going to be alone in your own head, sick of the same sparring partner over and over again.
Have you ever been in a bar and some guy was just getting up in your face and you would just say, one more, just one more. There's a move I want to try.
Oh, not me, never.
That means yes.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
I mean, a high crotch sounds like it might be offside, but other than that, in a bar.
Well, you know, I am small. I was a lightweight as a wrestler. I wrestled at 130 pounds, at 136 and a half. When I was over the age of 30, I couldn't make those weights anymore. I had to go up to 149 and a half. That was a big weight for me. I was always small as a kid, and I started wrestling arguably for the wrong reasons. My mother noticed that I got in a lot of fights, and she said, well, if you're going to do this, you might do something for yourself so that you might occasionally win one.
Thanks, Mom.
It was useful advice.
Do you think much of your legacy? Do you take that time? Or what it might be?
Gee, I think by the time you start considering your legacy, you might as well check yourself into an assisted living facility. You know, I don't think that's for me to decide. I don't have a hand to play, or I don't have any role in my legacy. I think if you're a father and your children love you, that matters. But if you're lucky to have readers as a writer, you should leave it at that. They're not your children. They don't have to always love you. That's not your job.
It's a book right here in one person. It's great to see you, John. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
John Irving, everybody. Thank you. I think you're right.